Yes.
And I'm going to ask Natalie to take roll call.
Sure. Jackie Gardina,
Here.
Jay Frickberg,
Present.
Dean Michael Clancy,
Present.
Martin Pritikin,
Here.
Jessica Park,
Present.
Greg Murphy,
Here.
Paul Kramer.
Here.
All
We
right.
have a quorum.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you everyone for coming. And I know that we've got a very full staff announcement or staff news part of our agenda, as well as a guest, Judith O'Kelly from the National LGBTQ+ bar. And so she'll be arriving around 1:15. So we'll make room for that when she's able to come. But before we get started on the agenda, I wanted to give anyone who would like to make public comment an opportunity to do so. So we'll just have people raise their hands if that's what they'd like to do.
And we don't have any raised hands at this time, Chair Gardina.
Okay, so we'll move on with the agenda, and this is going to be the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as posted?
I move to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, and I believe we still need a roll call vote because we're remote.
Yes, Chair Gardina, we do. I will take the roll. Dean Clancy,
Aye.
Dean Frickberg,
Aye.
Dean Pritikin,
Aye.
Dean Park,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Natalie. And now it is time for the staff report.
Okay, we're planned to begin with the implementation of the MPR. I'm going to share my screen just to bring up a slide that I think will help that discussion. We'll be talking about implementing the amended MPR. Can everyone see my screen? Here we go. Okay, now you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So the MPR has been in place for a number of years and back in place in the same way until recently. This year, the committee made an amendment to the calculation of the MPR in order to address that some graduates are participating in the provisional licensure program expanded pathway to licensure, or in fact, quite a few have already even become licensed. So that resulted in a change in the way that the reporting was happening, and the deans here all participated in that. So for the deans, this will be familiar to you. The first thing we did was to calculate the MPR in the traditional way to determine those what the list of students would be that would normally be in the numerator and the denominator based on whether they had taken a bar exam during the period and whether they had passed or failed that particular bar exam. The schools had pass-fail lists that are allowed under the Business and Professions Code 6060.25 in order to do that compare. And so once they sent in their preliminary list, we collaborated with the schools to agree on a specific universe. The next thing that the state bar did was, as of July 1st, which is what we were asked to do by the committee, we looked to see two groups of individuals. First, those who are currently participating in the PLP expanded pathway to licensure. So only those who qualified for the PLP program based on a previous exam score. And participation was determined as actual approval to be in the program. Those individuals were excluded from the calculation totally. The second group of individuals were people that had fully completed the pathway and in fact were licensed and had a bar number as of July 1st. I think most of you know that you receive your bar number retroactive to the day that you take the oath. So they were included as of their oath date, as long as it was July 1st or sooner. The PLP adjustment was provided to the schools as a numerical adjustment rather than the individual names, which is different than how we are able to handle the pass-fail list. Oh. Here we go. So that raised a couple of questions from the deans. Normally in the paperwork that we use and that we've been using for a number of years, the NPR was created using the pass-fail lists alone, and there was a certification item on the reporting that indicated that a responsible person at the law school certified that the results were true and correct. Here, it was possible to do that for the preliminary step, but for the step of the PLP adjustment, they could only certify that the arithmetic was correct because they didn't have the specific names. We had included the language from the prior year, thinking there was a common understanding and that it might be more disruptive to change that certification, but the schools just wanted to make sure that they were certifying the correct thing and not beyond what they could verify. So we just wanted to give some background as to what had been happening and to indicate that we can look into a different type of disclosure for next year. For the 2022 NPR, and the State Bar certainly understands what was available to the various schools. I didn't know if there are any questions regarding that at this point.
Any questions about that process from the committee members or comments?
Okay, if not, then ultimately those arithmetic numbers were, adjustments were made, and then the NPR reporting was created for the CBE, and this will be reported out on Friday to the CBE. And the schools were very cooperative. We didn't receive any objections to the numbers, and I think that the process went very well. So we want to thank everyone for that, and also remind you that because we can't release the names, we will be doing the same process next year. So we'll be first verifying the pass-fail lists and then doing the adjustments afterward. And we think that that process could work well again. And for the most part, for most schools, it was a pretty limited number of adjustments at the very end. So simply tracking via the pass-fail lists will give a very good idea of where things are going. And very happy to report that many of the schools, actually every school that reported a value above 40 increased their NPR versus last year. It was a very exciting trend, and hope to see that trend continue.
See, I do have a question, if we may, about the July 1st date. Sure. For purposes of entry into the program. We have people who applied, their applications were accepted by July 1st, but they didn't get a preliminary determination on their moral character determination. And as I understand it, because they didn't get that preliminary approval on the moral character determination, they don't get counted as being in the program. In other words, they don't come out of the denominator. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then next year, if they are still participating and they've got that, they will be included. Or if they have completed the pathway by that point, they'll be included as a completer. And part of the reason that we did this is because that's when we know that they will be able to participate. And it also gives the schools an opportunity to verify by going to the PLL attorney search.
All right, I have a second question, and it's about the fact that I am aware of a number of students who applied for entry to the program, but I'm thinking that we may have more. And I'm wondering if the State Bar will provide to us a list of those people who are graduates of our program who applied for entry to the PLP program. Will we get a list at some point?
That's not the plan. We have Jean Krasilnikov here from our OGC office, and I wondered if she might be able to participate here.
Sure, we're only authorized by statute to provide certain information to the law schools regarding their graduates, and that is not a list that we're allowed by statute to provide at this time. So I think at this point we do not anticipate providing a list. We're tethered and bound by the statute.
All right. So in other words, it's a matter of privacy because they graduated from our program, aren't connected to us any longer. That information can't be provided to us. Would that summarize it correctly?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
But you would not be prevented from surveying your own alumni if you wanted to reach out to them, and then it would be up to them whether or not they wanted to communicate back with the school.
All right, we've done that here, but we're not certain as to whether or not there are people who didn't respond to us who may have entered the program. So that uncertainty made it such that I felt that I had to ask that question. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Also, another possibility is that for some of the individuals, they did agree when they took the bar exam starting 2018 forward to share their results, including their score, with the law school, and you would get that information shortly after your pass-fail list and your details report. And by knowing those scores, that could also tell you if an individual would be eligible to apply, and that may provide some further information. But again, that would be a situation where the student had, and now the applicant had pre-agreed.
Right. I mean, the ideal would be to be told by the bar who's on your list, but if we can't do that at a minimum, I'm right. I mean, the deans can't certify data that they don't have, right?
And so we can more correctly adjust the certification in the future if everyone is okay with that, to talk about the part that you can, which is the arithmetic correction.
Well, I mean, even the arithmetic correction, and we can just say based on what the state bar has told us, this is what the correction would be. We can check the math, but we can't independently verify that that's accurate based on who actually participated in the program.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or you can also look to the attorney search. You've got your pass-fail results, and you've got your total licensure from your law school as well. But yeah, that's correct. We release what we are able to under the statute, and we'll continue to release everything that we can under the statute. Okay. Okay, so that's what I had for that item, Dean Gardina.
Thank you, Natalie. I noticed that Judy O'Kelly is in the attendee list. Would we want to bring her over to do a presentation?
That would be terrific. Let's go ahead and promote her. So that she can share some new opportunities for the law schools.
There. Am I showing for you all?
Yes.
Yes, welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you for having me. Thanks to all the members of the committee, and especially to Dean Gardina and Ms. Leonard for having me today. So I'm Judy O'Kelly. I'm the Chief Program Officer of the National LGBTQ+ Bar Association. And that is a rebrand for us that we just launched, actually sort of officially today, adding the Q+ onto the end of that. And it's kind of an exciting time for us as we're rebranding the website and everything else. So I'm delighted to be able to give you just a few quick updates today about the National LGBTQ+ Bar Association and Foundation's work. We do a lot that impacts law students and law schools, and I want to share more about that with you, and then share an exciting opportunity that we have to bring all of you into some of that work. So first, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows about our law school affiliate program. This program is open to LGBTQ student groups at any U.S. law school. We have currently about 100 affiliate groups at the moment, and you can see the list of them on our website if you go to lgbtqbar.org under the programs tab. And then there are both a law school tab and a law students tab. And the affiliates program information is under the law students tab as one of a number of resources we have there. So student groups that are affiliated with the LGBTQ plus bar receive a number of benefits. We host a listserv for all of student leaders of those groups to be able to share actions and support one another. We also share a resource and action guide that we wrote that provides ideas and support for student activities. Sometimes that's on campus, sometimes it's broader, and sometimes it's really just information about the health of that group and how they can think about future leadership and being inclusive themselves, particularly with respect to racial equity and also on gender equity and gender identity equity. We send out a monthly email to those groups with suggested actions of the month that they don't have to do, but that we want to give them something to riff off of, especially if they're kind of nascent groups and seeking a little bit of guidance. We also send job and internship and fellowship announcements that come our way to them. And we also provide 50% off of our annual LGBT bar membership dues for students. Ordinarily, it's $40 to join the National LGBTQ bar for law students. And if they're a member of one of these affiliate groups, then that drops down to $20. And we provide a code in our monthly emails so that students can have that. So really good opportunities there. And we'd invite all of you to share that information with your LGBTQ student groups if you have them. If you don't have them, there's information also on that page about how those groups could start up. And I am always here as a resource to talk to students who are interested or professors who are interested in helping to mentor a nascent group like that. I have those conversations every year and would be delighted to talk to your students about it. So other things we do, I think you might know about our annual Lavender Law Conference and Career Fair, which usually sees in person around 1,800 attorneys and law students, usually 300 to 400 law students who are coming and who have a couple of days of comprehensive programming on all kinds of topics, followed by the last day, which is holds a number of career planning sessions for students, and then has a career fair with anywhere from 180 to 200 recruiters every year who are specifically there to hire LGBTQ plus law students into summer jobs and often following into permanent jobs. So we are expecting, with public health willing, to be in Los Angeles next year at the Lowe's West Hollywood. It'll be from July 27th to 29th for Lavender Law that year. We're supposed to be there this year and those plans were derailed. We've had the last 2 years of our conference virtually, but we do hope that we'll be in person next year. Pardon me, I've got a fuzz in my eye. Hope that we'll be in person next year and able to be right there in California with all of you. Again, lots of career programming happens there. We also do a pre-conference day that's called the Lead Academy that is just for law students who want to experience a really deep dive into issues of LGBTQ plus policy and law and work to build relationships with prospective mentors. We have usually a faculty of 12 or 13 current sitting judges and lawyers who are part of that faculty. So we'd love to have you tell your students about that and to see your students there next year at the conference and at the Lead Academy. So the main reason that I'm here to talk to you today is to let you know about an exciting expansion that we're doing to our annual law school campus climate survey, which is heading into our 4th year this fall. We have been surveying all ABA accredited law schools about a range of topics impacting their LGBTQ constituencies that includes students, faculty, and administrators. We ask about self-ID programs. We ask about faculty benefits, curriculum questions, questions about the building facilities, and more. We send this survey, as well as a best practices guide that we developed to help support the school in making changes that might need to be made, to all of the law school deans every year around November 1. We ask for responses to come back around February 28th. So we want there to be plenty of time. Know that the holidays can be a tough time, and we just want plenty of time for all of you to be able to gather the responses because it's a deep survey. I wouldn't say it's a really extraordinarily heavy lift, but it is a lift. Usually if you're part of a broader campus, it requires some input from administrators at other parts of the campus and from a number of your own departments within the law schools. So we want to give you plenty of time. We publish the results around April 1 each year. This year we had 111 ABA accredited law schools participating in that. And what I'm really delighted to announce to all of you is that this year we're going to expand the survey and provide the opportunity for all of the deans of all California law schools, including California accredited and non-accredited schools, to be part of it. And we're doing that in part in anticipation of the California bar itself beginning to collect some demographic data around LGBTQ plus status. So we know you'll be doing some of that work anyway. And we're just honestly really happy and excited about the opportunity to support all the wonderful work that so many of you are doing to advance LGBTQ equality on your campuses and across the whole state. You can take a look at our annual survey so that you have a couple of months here to see what we ask. We don't usually change it a lot each year, and I think might be adding one question this year, but generally it'll stay pretty similar. You can go again to our website, lgbtqbar.org, and click on the programs tab, and then this time select the law schools option. And you'll see there we have the best practices guide that I mentioned, which might be helpful to you or your DEI folks. And then you can see the survey. You can tell what we do is provide a grid of the data with some of the highlighted answers. So there's lots of stuff to just sort of see en masse what all the schools have said. But you can also just click on the name of any individual law school and see all of their specific responses. And we do that because it's really important to us that we're reporting exactly what you all say. We have we're not just sort of crunching the numbers or putting our own spin on what those numbers are. We are publishing exactly what you say. I do write each year a executive summary that goes with it that has some of the kind of big picture of what we see in the way of trends. And that might be interesting to you to see this year's. The goal is really to lift up the good work that's happening. We publish this each year by sending that final data to all the law school deans. Everybody who participates gets an advanced week to look over what we've put up on the website in a hidden way and make sure that you're happy with the results. And then we send it out to all the law school deans. We publish it on our website. We send out a press release at that time of publication. We also share it with all the LGBTQ+ resource centers at undergraduate institutions across the country. And I want to say also, there's a lot of opportunity in there for text, as you will see. It's not just numbers, lots and lots of room for schools to talk about what they do and give the context for what they're doing and highlight the things that are unique to their particular circumstances. We really want, again, to raise up and lift up the great work that's happening. And we're just really excited to bring this opportunity to all of you and hope that all of you, as well as the other California schools, will participate this year. So happy to take any questions from you if you have any to ask.
Natalie?
I have a question. Will the new survey for the registered and unaccredited schools come out on the same schedule and the same timetable? And how much time should a school plan to invest in completing this, if you could guess, if they want to participate?
Good questions. I do expect we'll do it on the same timeline. We probably will have them as separate results for the moment, just for the time being, because the ABA accredited schools just sort of have their own process, and we share that data with the ABA, and we're an official arm of the ABA, so we share that with them. So it probably will just be a separate section, but on the exact same page with its own grid for California schools. And my gut about this is that what I would be doing is having the California ABA accredited schools included in both places, so that there's a full view of California on the second part of that. So yes, timeline likely the same, November 1 through February 28th to complete, and around April 1 for publication. Obviously, some of that depends. Within the last couple of years of COVID, we've granted some extensions. Certainly possible that could happen again if some schools need a little bit of extra time. We also, I should say, for schools that were just unable to do it, we actually continue to accept responses until June 30th, and we'll add them, but then they aren't part of the initial publication. And usually schools want to be part of that and be part of the press release and the attention that comes from it. That's really great. So in terms of how much time, it's a really good question. I think that probably depends a lot on what's already being gathered by the schools. Boy, I mean, again, you would want it, you need information from admissions, from faculty generally. There's some questions again about curriculum, whether there's any LGBTQ specific curriculum, and also whether other forms of curriculum include LGBTQ content. There, again, questions about facilities. I guess I would assume that it's probably spread out among a number of people. It probably takes about 10 hours. but it also depends. If you've already gathered some of that demographic data and you know these things, then it wouldn't take as long. You don't have to fill in every single question. There are lots of schools that don't have answers to some of them and don't fill those in to start off with, and that's okay. Again, I want to be clear, we don't rank. You know, this is not it's not intended to be like a win or lose scenario. It's a data sharing.
Okay. And then I had one more question. With Lavender Law scheduled to be in Los Angeles in the upcoming year, in addition to simply attending, would there be opportunities for schools to partner in other ways, hosting out of area law students or showcasing some student or faculty research and seminars or other possibilities?
Good question, thank you. We do take workshop proposals each year in the beginning of the year. They open up on January 1 and usually close around the same time as the survey, February 28th, because we do need to plan our program and have it wrapped up by mid-March so we can start publicizing. So if any of you want to just sign up on our listserv, go to our website. There's a bar on there that will just share our emails with you, a simple sign up process. You don't have to become a member to get the emails, and then you would see that. And so you could pass that around to anybody in your school who might want to be part of that. You can also just write to me if you're interested in being part of any particular programming that is student directed. I usually have when we're in person, it's been a little bit harder virtually because we've created some other opportunities for students in the virtual format. We had a wonderful platform that had a law student lounge in it, and we ran guided Zoom conversations and also had a 24/7 chat available to students to be able to have them network together. In person, what we do is usually hold one program that is specifically for students, and then we also hold a caucus that is for the entire law school community to come together. So faculty, administrators, and students to be together on and talk about something, a topic that usually relates back to whatever the program was about. And I am always looking for faculty to be part of that and administrators to be part of those kind of conversations. I should also note that we have a Law Student Congress that operates year round, which is kind of the student leadership arm that's separate from that affiliate program that I mentioned. And they're always looking for exciting ways to engage the broad student membership. And so again, if any of you are interested in getting your students engaged in that or being part of the programming we do for them, please write me. I'm judi@lgbtqbar.org. And I would absolutely welcome participation from any of you in either the faculty things we do or the student things.
Other questions?
I have my hand raised and
I'm sorry, Jessica, I missed that. Yes, thank you.
Oh, no worries. I just want to say, besides my question, thank you for the presentation. I think I'm very appreciative of just hearing about what you're doing for students and interested to hear about this survey instrument that's expanding to the Cal Accredited and registered law schools. A more vetted and well-used survey instrument is always great to see in action, and I think it's very helpful for some of the questions we want to ask students at our school. I think you were getting into that a little bit, especially knowing your association has done 2 virtual conferences, and everyone has been impacted very much by the pandemic. But I was just curious, and I'm speaking just as a dean from a fully online registered law school, in terms of your best practices guides for either law students or student leaders, how much have you embraced having advice or tips for kind of virtual meetings for those groups? Have you seen a lot come up from your student leaders about connecting or needing advice in those ways?
Such a good question, and thank you for that. I think we haven't really put anything expressly in writing about that, and it's such a good point, and it's probably time to think about doing some of that. But we have been providing a lot of support for students in this environment and thinking about the concerns that students have when they are ordinarily in the classroom and are now not. It's obviously a different dynamic for students who are full-time in the online dynamic and educational setting. And hopefully, I mean, I do hope better for those students, right? In that this is, and I'll say I'm sort of in that position myself. I always work at home. You know, I live in Seattle and the BARS offices are in DC. So I'm a full-time remote employee. And so this change wasn't as hard on me in a number of ways as it was on some other people who really had to change routines. And so I appreciate that distinction. And I think, yes, again, being virtual was really positive in a number of ways for us at the Lavender Law Conference and negative in other ways. There's some lessons from it that we want to take and transmit into the in-person environment. You know, we saw a lot higher number of students registering, becoming members this last 2 years. We did some comping of student registrations. I should say about that, Lavender Law Conference is free for any student who is a member. So again, if you're coming in either at that $20 discounted rate or the $40 rate, then the conference is free, not the travel and the housing, but the being there. And so we saw a lot of students who were very concerned about job prospects. That's probably the biggest impact that they seem to feel, particularly the class of 2020. And so we were providing extra counseling, a number of webinars, other forms of communicating with students in different ways. But I'll say, I mean, it expanded, but we also are doing that full time because we are a national organization and we aren't doing that much in person at law schools, even in the normal times. We do the live conference most of the time. But it's something that we do quarterly meetings online always for our Law Student Congress. We have webinars regularly and call-ins for members and for about educational topics. I think this was, again, a good opportunity for us to think about expanding that and meeting the needs in a different way of students who are remote. And also recognizing that for many students, they're reaching that Zoom burnout period. And I don't know if you see it as much in the remote setting. That'd be interesting to explore. But we know that some students are seeing that, and probably what I think was the consequence is that we had more people participating, but they didn't participate as fully. You know, they would dip in, right? When you aren't committing to come to something for the full day or the full week, then you dip in and you take a little bit out of it. And that's good to expand that to more people. And also a lot of people are probably missing things they would have had otherwise. So it's something to learn from for us. Thank you for asking that. It's something that I'd love to follow up with you about it and see if there are ways that you have ideas for how we could be reaching out in a better way.
Well, no, thank you for that. I think that was very helpful and something we want to build up more for our students to associate with national organizations or local organizations as well.
Thank you.
Jay?
Thank you. Judy, thank you for joining us and definitely for including us as we go forward. I definitely look forward to the data, learning more about students from my institution as well as the other CALs and registered schools. Just had two interrelated questions. One, do you have any recommendations? Because anytime we get to this intersectionality or disaggregated data, there's always concerns from students, at least our smaller institutions, of giving out more information than they feel comfortable with. So are there any recommendations on how we can approach those issues? And then tied to that, what is the methodology? Are the institutions themselves performing the survey? Or is your organization performing the survey and we're just giving the link for our students, which they might feel more comfortable with in gathering the data? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. So second one first, you provide the data to us, you as the schools, not the students directly. And that is pretty important actually, that this should not go to the students. It is for the school to participate in. One of the questions, it's a Google form. We send you a Google form with questions and it's just filled out. We also send you a Word version of that so that you can do all the prep in advance and not risk the losing of the hard work you've done if the survey is only half completed when you're ready. So yeah, it's definitely not data that's appropriate for students themselves to fill out. It requires aggregate data. And again, I just want to honor that there's sort of a learning curve in a lot of ways of thinking about inclusion, and particularly around the realm of self-ID, the kind of questions you're asking about demographic data. What we're seeing from the ABA accredited schools is that about 75% excuse me, 75% of the schools that report to us, which again is over half of schools. We had about 111 ABA accredited schools participating this year, so more than half. About 75% of reporting schools are doing self-ID for their students. Only 25% of those are doing self-ID for their faculty and administrators. And so that's something that we are stressing repeatedly. I've got some resources, if any of you are interested, that I'm happy to share, of video clips from our Lavender Law programs from employment law specialists who talk about why self-ID is actually not only legal, but also desirable. It's a good idea. There are, of course, some safety mechanisms that need to be in place, that it needs to have an option of confidentiality, needs to be voluntary, and it absolutely needs to have no negative ramifications for having participated in it. I say that would be probably true for students as well, although students are clearly in a different situation than employees. But when you ask those questions about intersectionality, and yes, when you're getting into small numbers of students, it may well be that it's more easy to identify somebody who identifies as both a person of color and LGBTQ. Again, I think if you've done the survey the correct way of making it optional and confidential, then it's up to the individual person how they participate in your collection of that data. How you respond back to us is with respect to, who have self-identified, right? Which doesn't mean that they have to be out in every single way, but they do need to have self-identified. We very strongly do not want people to guess, right? And that happens a lot, where folks are guessing, or they know that someone is openly identifying as a member of the community on their faculty. That is how we get a lot of identifying of people who are actually bisexual being identified as though they are lesbian and gay by another administrator who thinks they know, but they actually don't, right? So I think it's important to structure that demographic gathering yourself within your institution, which again, we're happy to talk to you about. We wouldn't be in a lawyer relationship with you, but we could certainly recommend some folks to do that if you wanted that input. We also do have, however, a DEI consultant on our staff in a fee-for-service program. I am not here to sell you that, right? That is not a condition of being part of this survey, but it is a need that we saw coming out of our first year of the survey, that there were schools, and there are also a lot of law firms and companies that have asked us to help them with that. So we do have somebody who specifically has experience. He's an out trans man who can come in and speak to your faculty, talk, discuss policies and procedures with you if that's helpful. And there, we have fee-for-service packages if you want to explore that with us. But again, that's a separate thing. So happy to provide whatever support we can for you on building that survey. I think as long as it's entirely voluntary, that it shouldn't pose any particular confidentiality issues. I'm sorry, can you re-ask your first question? Because yes, a good one, and I skipped it.
Well, no, I think they were tied together. And yeah, so the first one was the one that you answered. The second one was whether or not the institution or your organization actually does the surveying itself. Yes. So you answered both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Great. Judy, thank you so much for coming. And I just want to echo everyone's thanks that you received for including us in it. And like Jay, I'll be excited to see how our schools kind of represent. And I think to Jay's point, some of our schools can be as small as 30 students or as large as hundreds of students. So I think the data will look different than what it does for ABA schools, who tend to be in the hundreds pretty regularly, although that varies. So yeah, and I think that's part of what Jay's concern was. If you've got one person who identifies as gay and also identifies as Black, you now have, and you have a small population of African Americans in your school, you've now potentially outed that person in a national survey that's available on your website. So just wanted to kind of key in on, I think, what one of the concerns is for especially schools with small populations that might result in some questions not being answered if there is a small number of individuals who self-identify that could be de-identified based on that small number.
Completely agree. And I think that the only response I have to that concern is just that it might also be worth asking before making a decision not to report, because what I do often still see is sort of an assumption that there is a stigma still associated with identifying as LGBTQ. There's a knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people that we should not be gathering that because that's private, whereas other demographic data people would gather without thinking about it. And I think it's important to recognize that that's coming from a perspective of stigmatizing. And that is, you know, and yet also you're correct that there is stigma out in the world, and we have to be conscious of that. And so sometimes, you know, even asking if you can tell that, if you know who that faculty member is going to be, asking whether they think about it might be the answer. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just California is deemed to be liberal, but there are definitely a range of beliefs and traditions here. And I just spoke at a community college for their very first ever LGBT Pride Month event. And it was amazing to me that 30 years after I came out, there are young people who are having the same struggles with their families and with their communities that I had 30 years ago. So it is a very real thing for many in California, that they still feel the weight of that stigma in their communities.
Absolutely. And even more so for transgender students and non-binary students who are facing all of that stigma, facing a difficult political national climate, and also, you know, facing a lot of lack of understanding of even the grammar that is being used to designate them. So yes, there's a lot there. I appreciate your sensitivity.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming, and it'll be exciting to see our results next year.
Looking forward to it. And please also, if any of you have somebody other than the dean of your law school whom you'd like us to include in sending that survey, please write me, again, judi@lgbtqbar.org, and we will add that person to it. Otherwise, we always send it to the dean every year just for that core accountability, but we're happy to add additional folks. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, Natalie, it appears we can move forward with our staff report.
Sure. Okay, the next item is a report on the implementation of the accredited law schools that will be rules that will be effective in January. So you know that they've been passed, they're on schedule, but I just wanted to make the CSBARS aware of a technical administrative item that will be on the CBE agenda on Friday, and it relates to moving the newly amended 2021 MPR formula that we just discussed into the rules. And I'm going to pull up a little chart that will help us to do that. Oops. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So currently and historically, the MPR was a part of the guidelines for accredited law schools. And you know that that's guideline 12.1. Everyone just recently utilized that guideline in doing the 2021 reporting. And it was amended in April. But it was amended after the new rules were posted for comment to be sent to the Board of Trustees. And in the new rules just take that exact same formula, but they move it into the rule set instead of the guideline set. And there is a different process for amending the rules than for the guidelines. The guidelines can be amended by the committee after receiving feedback from CSBARS and the public. But the rules can only be amended by the Board of Trustees. So you will see an item 404 on Friday's agenda that intends to move the amendments that the committee created in April into the rules that will become effective January 1st of next year. It's not expected that the MPR would change in any way. But just simply that process has to happen. And so the CBE will consider a proposal to recommend to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees can decide to post it for public comment. And then afterward, it can be considered for adoption or approval by the Board of Trustees. And it's intended that this process could happen certainly well in time for the reporting of the 2022 MPR, but probably before the effective date of the rules. So the CBE's next step is to take care of this very first item. CBE recommends proposal to Board of Trustees. They'll be talking about this possible proposal on Friday. Any questions about that, or is there any need to review the actual proposal language?
And I believe, Natalie, the proposal language for those in the audience is available on the CBE agenda.
That's correct. It would be item 404. And there was a small amendment that was made today, which put the deadline, the July 1st deadline, into the first paragraph rather than the second. So that's what the repost was about. But it's really not intended to change the MPR in any way. And I know that this committee has been talking about those changes in great detail over a number of meetings. Just wanted to update you on that proposal. If no further questions, then that item is completed.
All right, any questions? Okay, so thank you.
Okay, the next one is a verbal item. It relates to the waiver that fixed facility schools have been using to teach classes online, whether they are accredited law schools or registered law schools. So just a reminder that the committee has had that waiver in place since spring of last year. It is going to conclude in December of this upcoming year. And it's hoped that this has given the schools enough time to determine what they would like to do going forward. It is not the committee's intention that a school can't continue to stay online if they think that's appropriate, but the means to do so would be a major change as of October 1st. For those schools that do plan to conclude their online teaching, you would have one more status report, which is coming up November 15th. We've received a few questions from students, which encouraged us to place this online. They wondered if the State Bar was requiring schools to either teach online or requiring schools to be in person, and neither is the case. We understand that you've got to make decisions that are appropriate for your student body in your particular county. Any questions about that timeline? The schools have been doing a great job with this. Everyone filed their timely quarterly report as of August 15th. And I think most schools are well aware of the October deadline. The deadline doesn't mean that a school can't file something later, but by having a complete application in by October 1st, it will help us to prepare the item for the committee to make a decision in December, so you can have seamless operation in that manner. I appreciate everyone's attention to balancing the need for excellence in education with safeguarding public health, and I appreciate everyone's success in using this waiver. Okay, that's
one more quarterly report due from schools under the current waiver requirement.
Yes, and that's November 15, which is the same deadline as the annual report. So schools are free to send that in along with the annual report if they would like to.
Thank you, Natalie.
Okay. Great. Okay. Shall we move on to the next item? I'm going to bring up a slide regarding that. The next item relates to opportunities for law students and applicants with the California Lawyers Association, particularly in relation to the provisional licensing program. And I'm going to bring up a slide that will help us. we apologize. We intended to have a guest from the California Lawyers Association. They were unavailable, so I will be the stand-in. I don't quite know as much information as all of them, but I think I have some details that are really helpful for both your students and your grads. But this is the NPR formula. Let me bring up their slide. Sorry for the delay. Thank you.
Natalie, on what you sent me, it's slide 2. I don't know whether you've adjusted your slide since then.
Yeah, here we go. I think we've got it now. Can everyone see resources at the California Lawyers Association?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for the delay. So a couple of things to know. This one,
Right.
the first, oh.
Now we're seeing the, yeah.
Natalie, I think you have to exit and pull up the new PowerPoint and then come back in. It's a really weird functionality issue with Zoom.
Oh, okay. I'll go ahead and give that a try because I do think it is a good opportunity that I want you to hear about. The California Lawyers Association is a separate organization, separate from the bar, that offers educational and networking opportunities. And most people know that that is available to lawyers in California and elsewhere. But not everyone is aware that there are options for law students and applicants. And if I can share my screen, I can make you aware of those opportunities.
They're there.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Oh no.
Here we go. Okay, a couple of things. Not all law students may know that they can join the CLA for free. And in addition to joining the CLA, they can join 3 sections for free. So I know that we're going to talk about PLP in a moment, and current law students are not eligible for that. But there are many networking opportunities that your current law students can take advantage of at no charge. And I believe that that is not a discount related to COVID. I believe that that is the case. And so hopefully all of your students that show an interest would be able to do this. And this would give them access to network not only with attorneys that are in their local area, but also attorneys throughout the state. And there are 17 different practice area sections, including one that is specifically for young lawyers, and law students are welcome to participate in that section. Then moving on specifically to the PLP program, both those that are already in the PLL program and thinking about joining, we understand that the expanded pathway closed on May 31st, but the general route for those who graduated between December 9, 2019 and December 2020 is still open and accepting applications. So one thing we heard is that some graduates would like to participate in the program, but they haven't yet found an attorney placement. So it might be helpful to know that they will, these applicants who are not yet licensed can also join the CLA for free. And if so, there is a special provisional licensure forum that is for members, including those that have the free membership, where the graduates can network and look for an attorney placement if they want to be a PLL, and their free membership will continue while they are participating in the PLL program. Similarly, if you have alumni from your school that say, hey, I may be interested in employing a PLL. I would like to find out more about the program. The State Bar, of course, has resources for those supervising attorneys, but so does the CLA, and it does have a forum. So your alumni could say, hey, has anyone done this before? Have you had a great experience with a PLL? What do I need to know before I hire one to come work in my office? So that's a very nice resource to have. And this information was provided to us through CLA, and they really wanted to make the contact information of Ms. Ellen Miller available to all of you. Encourage you to reach out if your students or your applicants or your alumni who are interested in being supervising attorneys would like more information. And that hope everyone who is interested will check out the California Lawyers Forum on provisional licensure, which I understand has had very active traffic throughout the entire licensure period so far. So that's what I have regarding that program. Any questions?
Thank you, Natalie.
Okay. All right, are we ready to move on to the next topic? Okay, next topic is talking a little bit about the Law School Assembly and the registrar's meeting. And some folks here have participated in those meetings before, and for others, this will be a brand new opportunity. We really appreciate having this forum through CSBARS to talk with a series of representatives from both the registered and accredited schools. But each year we use the Law School Assembly and the registrar's meeting to have an interactive dialogue with people from all of the law schools. The Law School Assembly is generally attended by deans or other administrators. The registrar's meeting is generally more detailed in terms of record keeping. The registrar attends, and sometimes others want to attend as well. But a key to making these meetings very helpful is understanding what you most want to hear about, and whether it's something that's new, a problem that we've not heard about before, or a place where students tend to ask the same questions, even if you think that the information has been provided to them. We've taken a lot of action in response to what we've heard at these meetings before because we've gotten that specific feedback. So we've adjusted what the Ames portal says to make messages more clear, the applicant portal to make messages more clear for students. You might remember we had representatives from our ARCR consumer resources section talk about the oath packets, and I'm very excited to report that as a result of ferrying that information back to your graduates and the new webpage that we have, it's cut the time to get a bar number in half versus what we saw prior to that. We've started the Friday e-blasts that go out to both students and deans. We've expanded the distribution of the newsletter. So we definitely do target these meetings for action, but in order to do that, we need your help. And I will bravely attempt to show you another slide. Let's see how this works, where we can talk about some specific topics. And we're going to try something that we haven't tried before to encourage those that are in the audience to participate. For the Law School Assembly, you can be sure that we'll be sharing whatever updates we may have regarding state bar exams, a recap of exams past, format of the upcoming exam, information about the future, like the Blue Ribbon panel, which you'll hear more about today. We'll certainly also include information about the results of the BAR Strategies and Stories program so far. I know that many of your students have already participated in this program that helps students to maintain a productive mindset, but because it's not being conducted by the State Bar, we actually don't have the results either, and we're looking forward to those, and a preview of those will be discussed on Friday. We'll include an update from the Office of Access and Inclusion. We'll remind you about the moral character process and that you can have presentations at your own school. And if there is news regarding the PLL program, we'll share that too. But we'll be looking to you in the invitations that we send out next week or also today to find out your school's top questions or concerns, as well as your students' top questions or concerns. We'll get to the registrars meeting and voting in a second. But are there any topics that come to mind that you can think about at this time, though there will be opportunities after this meeting too?
Anyone want to add to the list?
I do. I'd like to suggest that someone cover the topic of the requirements related to admission for foreign educated lawyers. We have applicants every now and then who appear to us to already meet the requirements for admission to the state bar. But I know that over the years, the requirements have changed somewhat. I'd like to know for sure what those requirements are now. And I'm positive that our registrar would like to know as much as she can get in the way of detail regarding that. So if that topic could be covered, I'd be appreciative.
Well, based on that, Dean Clancy, I think you're going to really like my next slide. Okay. Are there any other suggestions? Okay, then let's proceed to that next slide. Okay, so in the registrar's meeting, we generally can tackle very specific topics. And I want to try something that we haven't necessarily done before. Let's see how this works. I'm going to talk about some of the different topics briefly, and I think there'll be things that you know. I'm interested to know whether or not you're interested in hearing more about these topics, either to acquaint a registrar who's new or to learn new information about it. And so as I read a topic name, I'm just going to ask you if you can raise your hand, and I'll be able to see if the members are raising their hands, but I'll also be able to see if the audience is raising their hands as well. And so in order so that I can see the audience, I'm going to take this slide off of the screen, but I'm going to read these various topics to you. So thank you for participating in an experiment with me. Okay, so now I can see everyone. So thinking about things that could be in the registrar's meeting, one idea would be a demo of the applicant portal, what a student would see when they log on to the applicant portal for some of the most common actions. And if you're interested in a live demo, just go ahead and raise your hand. Thank you. And it looks like we have quite a few people interested in that. Looks like we've got 8 hands, 9. Oh, still more coming. Quite a few seem to be interested in that one. Next topic, pre-legal analysis. So that's looking at what does a student need to have in order to start law school? If they don't have a bachelor's degree, what are the opportunities for them? If they do have a bachelor's degree, but it was obtained outside of the US, what are the opportunities? If they have a higher ed degree, whether foreign or local, what are the opportunities? Let's see if there's interest in that one. We have 8 votes for that. Thank you. Okay, the next one is start over forms. And so start over form is something that someone would use if they want to disclaim their prior education and begin their study fresh and new. Is there interest in learning about those? Though I think we do have some experts on that topic here. Okay, and I see 7 hands for start over. Thank you. Oh, there's still a lot of interest in that. Okay, good to know. And then in line with Dean Clancy's suggestion, for attorneys who have received their first foreign degree in law, what do they need to do to establish eligibility to take the California bar exam as far as the education piece that the law schools can offer? Is that something of interest to folks? And right now, the accredited law schools do have the opportunity to provide that education, and we can talk a little bit more about that. C3 hands for that one. We are almost done. We have just a couple more. The next one is practical training of law students appearing under a supervising attorney. We hope that things have been going well for you applying for that program during the pandemic. We can talk about the application process and also share with you some new staff that are supporting that program, also called the PTLS program. Okay, and I see a couple hands for that one. And then finally, we can include a review of the new accredited law school rules, what will be similar, what will be different, and some of the types of changes that your registrar's office can make to plan ahead for this. And I see 9 hands for that one. Okay, great. Thank you for trying something a little bit different. And it's great to be able to involve the audience in this as well. For the deans that were not here today, or the registrars that were not here today, when we send out the invitation next week, we will include the opportunity to submit additional questions. And we really encourage you to be very specific about the kinds of things you want to know, because that's how we can make the best presentation for you and also make the most responsive change as well. And sometimes it can be the tiniest thing. So for example, in the area of testing accommodations, one thing we learned this year was that the most common tip we needed to give was to say that after a student places their application in verified status, they must hit submit in order for the State Bar to see and start processing. And so just getting that word out there really helped to move the process along. Or another similar TA tip had to do with people are delaying a little bit longer to apply for TA. Perhaps we think in part because people are waiting to know the exact parameters of the exam. But we remind you that we encourage students to apply as soon as possible. For static disability, the determination can be good for 5 years. And if you determine that there's a parameter of the exam that makes you want to change your application, you can absolutely do that. So we would highly encourage you to talk to your students about applying as soon as they are ready, and reminding them that the TA application is decoupled from their actual bar exam application. So they don't have to have a bar exam application in place. And having that certainty as many as 5 years in advance, we think would be very helpful to them. Okay, so looking forward to the most specific feedback possible. It will help us to help you. Okay, and looking forward to these meetings with you in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. And it looks like we now have an update on the Blue Ribbon Commission. And Amy, is that you?
All right, getting rid of my mute problem here. So let me share my screen. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. As many of you know and are aware of, we are embarking on a Blue Ribbon Commission that's looking at the future of the bar exam. And this is a partnership between the California Supreme Court and the State Bar Board of Trustees. So the commission itself is charged to consider the 2 different practice analysis that were conducted. There was a California-based version of the analysis. This is looking at the knowledge, skills, and abilities required of entry-level attorneys in California. That was conducted in 2020, as well as looking at the practice analysis that was conducted by the National Conference of Bar Examiners nationwide. So in looking at this, both the reports and the recommendations coming from both the California and the national analysis, using that information to assess whether there is sufficient alignment between the California and the national job analysis, with the consideration of whether or not to adopt the UBE, that is the Uniform Bar Examination that's used in other bar jurisdictions. So if the commission decides, considers that there isn't sufficient alignment, that perhaps we need a California-based examination, then the next issues of decision and that the group has been directed to look at is what would that California exam look like? What are the alternatives in terms of for examinations to be used to measure minimum competence in California? And also exploring the idea of exam alternatives. And this could include different initiatives such as diploma privilege and looking at also other possibilities of provisional licensing, apprenticeships, and so on. The other items that are on the table and the group has been charged to look at too is considerations of other exam formats. And this would include continuing with an online exam and as well as open book options. Now, in terms of the members, there are 16 members that have been appointed by the California Supreme Court. They represent key institutional entities, also attorneys in various practice, coming from various practice settings. They all reflect the state's demographic and geographic diversity. And this is the composition of that commission. Where we're at now, on July 6th, the group had their first meeting. That meeting was really dedicated to providing the commission a background and also information on the foundational work that's been conducted related to the bar exam. So, some of the presentations that happened at that meeting included, what the bar examination is composed of, like what different portions of the exam exist now. Also looking at the relationship between the MBE, that is the multi-state bar examination, the multiple choice portion of the UBE, and the connection with the California bar exam, as well as exploring the work that was being conducted by the National Conference of Bar Examiners Testing Task Force. As many of you are aware, they're on a parallel track in terms of assessing the current their current exam, and looking at methods of improving that based on their findings in their practice analysis findings. That meeting was webcast and is available on our state bar website if anybody would like to access that. And we will continue to record and offer the meetings. It's a public meeting that is available, so anybody can join. And if you're unable to join during that session, as mentioned, you can access that webcast on our state bar website. The next meeting is scheduled for September 1st, and it's that meeting will be held from 10 to about 4 p.m., 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And in terms of the initiative itself, we're anticipating about 18 months of work from the commission, and which puts a tentative final report scheduled for January 2023. With that, does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the committee members? I would encourage, if you weren't able to attend the first Blue Ribbon Commission meeting, I would encourage people to at least listen to the portion of the meeting that was related to the changes that the NCBE is considering to the UBE. I think one of the things that makes the Blue Ribbon Commission's work challenging when you see the list of things that we're looking at, which is whether or not to adopt the UBE, is that the NCBE is actually going through some pretty big changes to what the UBE might look like in a couple of years. So the Blue Ribbon Commission is working off of kind of an uncertain landscape when it comes to that UBE and how it might affect California test takers. But I would encourage people to listen to the presentation by the NCBE person who presented at the last Blue Ribbon Commission.
Mm-hmm. All right. Great. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Amy. Mm-hmm. All right. Any recent developments that the staff wants to bring forward?
I don't think we have any at the moment.
Is there a hand raised? Dean
Oh,
Clancy.
I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Audrey. Mike.
I inadvertently had that hand up. It's probably been up for some time. I apologize.
Okay. So that's the staff report. There is one other agenda item, which is action on CSBARS recommendation regarding proposed guidelines. That has been on the agenda. There's actually no action that we need to take. The proposed guidelines are going to be presented to the CBE. And that agenda item is available on the CBE agenda posted on the website. There, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Natalie, it's only up for discussion on Friday. So it will come back around in the October meeting.
That's correct.
So an opportunity to comment tomorrow or on Friday, another opportunity to provide comments throughout the time frame between Friday's meeting and the October meeting, as well as to comment in the October meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So it appears as if we are able to end the meeting early today. So you guys will all get a little bit of time left.
So just a quick question before the committee decides whether to do that. Did you have any discussion that you wanted to have about the comparison between the staff edit and the CSBARS edit? Or if not, we absolutely can end early.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I appreciate you raising it. Everyone had the opportunity to see the distinction between the two. And I know Jessica was able to bring up a couple of technical corrections that she raised and brought to your attention, Natalie. Does anyone have any substantive corrections or questions or comments that they want to bring forth?
I do have a brief one at the risk of not ending quite as early as everyone had just hoped. So Natalie, when we had spoken, that first guideline where regarding 4.147, I just lost it, C, under C1I, CSBARS had recommended a guideline that says that a jointly accredited school can fulfill this by submitting a periodic report for jointly accredited schools. The staff recommendation was to delete that guideline. My understanding was that suggestion to delete it might have been based on a misunderstanding that applied only to sub I, not to all of it. Is it still staff's recommendation to delete that?
It would be a reason being that the annual report, I think that the idea is close in theory, but might need to be some adjustment in wording that could go along with the annual report. In addition to the annual report, it is possible that other things will be needed. So for example, the 6061 report that's required under statute, or potentially additional demographic adjustments, things like that. And so it is intended that jointly accredited schools will comply based upon reporting, but it may not be the annual report alone. And that's the reasoning behind that. And so as the annual report is developed, that information would be available to schools in advance to see that when they're deciding whether or not to apply for the jointly accredited status.
Okay. Two other questions. On the second one regarding 4.160A1 about the primary administrative office.
Yes.
So for the staff edits, the last edit at the end, it says so long as the records and services are available at the law school's administrative offices, right? I guess I'm a little confused by that because I understand the idea that if records are hosted or stored electronically out of state, the point is if someone shows up to the administrative office, they need to be able to access those from a computer in the office. Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Now, what about the services though? Because if the services are being offered by personnel out of state, then is the idea here that by being available in the administrative office, that means you could hop on a phone call or a Zoom with that person? Like what was the thinking behind that phrase, and services?
Right. So the same thing. So if a student wanted to seek a service in person, then they could go to the administrative office and say, hey, I want to access this service. I understand that it is the dean of students who provides this, and that individual is located in Philadelphia. I feel better being at the school, to have that conversation that way where I can access it at the administrative office.
Okay. And then last question is on the fourth guideline. This is, I think, B11 about maintaining records. Maybe it's A11. Staff suggestion is to delete this. And again, I think we discussed this, but I can't recall. Is why was there a suggestion that everything needs to be kept for 2 inspection periods, not just certain data?
Sure. Okay. So just to give everyone in the group and the public a little background, the new rule asks schools to keep data from the most recent 2 inspections. So for most schools, that will be 10 years. I know that that sounds like a long time, but the committee frequently uses data from 2 different inspections, plus the current, to look at a trend. And so the CSBARS suggestion, which I'd be happy to bring up if it helps, is that the school must only keep information for that trended period for items of specific non-compliance. But in addition to items of specific non-compliance, the committee also has other recommendations, mandatory and suggested recommendations, that don't rise to the level of an actual notice of non-compliance, and the committee will still want access to that material. It is possible that if necessary, there could be some sort of guideline sculpted if it's needed, but right now staff is recommending the rule as it stands because it might cut out some of the data that is needed for the committee to discharge its duty to the public.
And was there consideration to modifying the guidelines, so rather than limiting it to areas of non-compliance for 2 years or 2 periods, areas of non-compliance or mandatory or recommended items? So that way it still leaves other, it's not the entire universe of documents for up to 10 or 14 years, but just ones where some issue has been identified.
It was something that was discussed internally. Part of the thinking is that so much is changing in this rule set. There is so much in terms of the additional formats that are available, and the schools have been able to successfully keep this information, and hopefully it's easier for the schools to keep it going forward because most schools already have a digitized record set, and so providing the committee with the option to become familiar with the new rule set and the new degrees of freedom that the schools have, it's helpful to take a little bit more time. That was the staff thinking.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thanks, Marty. Others who might want to raise any substantive issues or questions?
I'll just take a moment to thank the committee, because ultimately the committee's rules guideline set has only 5 recommendations, and that might look like a small piece of work, but in order to do that, this committee studied the entire rule set, comparing it to the current 60 pages of guidelines, therefore creating a clear set of rules and resulting in just 5 guidelines. But to get to that point, to get to an elegant solution, this committee worked very hard, and I'm very grateful for those efforts.
Thank you, Natalie. And I do want to note that this is Dean Pritikin's last CSBARS meeting, I believe. He's rotating off, and I have to say, Marty, your addition to the committee was essential to the work that we did this year. So thank you for all that you've done, including in this meeting, to really pay attention to language and wording and everything that went into those rules. You were a critical part of making that happen. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure and honor. And this is your last meeting as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. So over the last 2.5 years, I mean, the committee has drafted an entirely new set of accreditation rules. that I really believe is going to allow our schools to highlight the quality that we bring to the legal profession here in California. And we did it during a global pandemic. When we were all struggling professionally, many of us having to pivot our schools to remote learning, managing student anxiety and difficulties, as well as whatever personal challenges came with the global pandemic that sadly continues now. And the new rules and guidelines would not have been possible without everyone who is here on the committee right now, including Mike and Jessica playing a new role, but an essential role in the work that we did with the guidelines. And without Dean Brandis and Dean Pertil and CBE member Kareem Gangora, who served on the committee previously. And it would not have happened without Natalie's support and the efforts as well as those of other State Bar staff. The admissions committee and Natalie were swamped during the pandemic, having to pivot to remote bar exams among many other challenges. And we still managed with Natalie's continuing to push to meet a timeline where we completed the rules and are able to have them start in January 1st, 2022. So I appreciate that I've had the opportunity to serve in this capacity and to work closely with so many of my fellow deans and get to know you better. And I really look forward to just making public comments and to talk to my fellow deans without worrying about a Bagley-Keene violation. So, and with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
All right, so if there's no objection.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, everyone.
Marty.
Thank you, Dean Gardena.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you.